Elves reincarnate. Astarion would live forever, his soulmate dying and being reborn again and again as someone new. He would always remember his past, but his mate would always forget. And since his soul is twisted and bound to his vampiric form, he would never reincarnate. He wouldn't walk the fugue plains to be collected by another god, nor would he face the wall of the faithless. He would be trapped, never to see Arvandor, never to rejoin Corellon. Welcome to the Forgotten Realms, the home of Dungeons & Dragons and Baldur's Gate 3. Today we're talking about Corellon the Best God, the creator of Elves, the god of magic, beauty, and art, and perhaps one of the most misunderstood deities in all of Faerun. Corellon is the reason elves exist, the reason they reincarnate, and, depending on who you ask, the reason they don't get collected by any other gods. So that begs the question, is Corellon a good god? Why are we asking this question? Well, because when I made a short video on Elven Reincarnation, you all had opinions, and I mean a lot of them. What I sat with afterwards was this: did Corellon truly punish the elves with reincarnation? Or was it a blessing from a loving father in disguise? Was it judgment or a divine kind of mercy? In this essay, we'll be using multiple sources, like a lot of sources. Like I am buried in a mountain of official Wizards of the Coast and TSR materials. So there's not a variety of sources today, just so many sources that I'm worried I'm going to overgo my word count for my description. And that begs a trigger warning. If you dislike when canonical sources call your versions of D&D into question and don't back up your toxic opinions, well, that's a you problem, not an us problem. So take a deep breath and realize you can still play however you want. The canonical lore does not change your campaign. That's the beauty of role-playing. It's fluid, baby. And if you're someone who will scream into a pillow if you hear the term pronouns, if you can't handle the fact that elven society exists outside of gender norms, and that the majority of fictional elves are based in queerness, if you're gonna cry and kick up a fit over a man giving his wives hardcore devotion and elevating women to positions of power, in short, if equality will drive you into a toxic comment-leaving frenzy, this episode's really gonna upset you. And also, like, how did you even get here? But if you love truly equal societies, if you've been looking for a non-gender conforming, pronouns are fluid god to admire in a fantasy IP, if you like to fan for elves with long blonde or white hair, and who will literally make you a god beside them because that's the level of princess treatment that they offer, well, then you're gonna love this one, babe. And if you enjoy this brand of dark romance academia, then maybe you're meant to be a sub. No, not that kind of sub. So please like, comment, subscribe, or even share this video on Discord, because my YouTube overlords demand sacrifice.
Ooh, jump scare, it's my face. Editing Kit here. Also, sorry for the fact that I keep tripping over pronunciations in this video and that my voice keeps dipping in and out. The only day I had to record it, they were doing landscaping and
And with that, grab your cozy drink and relax, because I'm gonna go a little deep. So, who is Corellon? Let's start with a good behind the drama. Corellon, also known as the creator of the Elves, the ruler of Arvandor, and the father of elvenkind, and if you're feeling a little snarky, the big fairy. He's the chief deity of the Celadrine, the Elven Pantheon. He governs all things Elven: art, magic, beauty, poetry, and every other element that is an aesthetic that makes elves elves. He is often described as a warrior poet, a master of both sword and spell, a creator who wept the first elves into being from his blood and Sahanan's tears. And Corellon, he didn't create them on purpose either, but he instantly embraced his children and became a father to the race he'd never meant to create, giving them more love than even some gods who have carved perfect races into their creations. Corellon isn't just a god. He's the god when it comes to elves. their spiritual origin, their final destination, their cosmic parent. He also has no fixed gender or form. Corellon can be male, female, both, or neither. He is fluidity made divine, and once upon a time, so were all of the elves. And although Corellon is androgynous and uses all pronouns, including she, her, and they, them, Corellon is 80% or more of the time seen using he, him pronouns. So for this essay, I will be using he, him to stay in line with anything that I'm quoting or paraphrasing. However, keep in mind that Corellon is a gender-fluid character and a great example of how Elven society doesn't have gender norms or requirement. At its core, all the way up to the creator god, Elven culture is a deeply queer and accepting society. And yes, that is the gender-fluid flag you're seeing with Corellon's image. But if you want to know more about each flag, be sure to tune into our weekly Gamer Pride short series. According to ancient myth, elves were born from Corellon's essence. They were not merely created, they were part of him. And like him, they had no fixed shape or gender. They were eternal, immortal, ever-changing. But then, they changed. They chose. They took on fixed mortal forms, gendered bodies, physical selves, and that choice changed everything. Some say that Corellon wept, others say that he was enraged. But whatever it was he felt, one thing was made clear. Those who chose permanence would not be welcomed home. Not right away. And we'll get into what actually happened here and why in a later chapter. Instead of an afterlife in Arvandor, these elves would reincarnate, again and again. Not damned, not blessed, just waiting. Repeating. So, who is Corellon really? A liberator? Maybe a visionary? A divine parent trying to guide his children back to their true selves? Or is he something harsher? A god who couldn't bear to see his children grow up and become something different than himself? Is he a loving father, a beautiful tyrant? And that's what we'll discover as we dig into the most beautiful god's history. So, how did the elves get here? Not just to Faerun, but into existence at all. The oldest and most widely told origin myth says it all began with a battle. Corellon was fighting Grumish, the god of orcs, and one of his oldest enemies, when he was nearly slain. Depending on the version of the story, he was betrayed by his beloved, or he was outmatched, or he was simply caught off guard. But one thing is true in all of them. It was Sehainen Moonbow, the elven moon goddess and Corellon's advisor on the Pantheon, who came to his aid. She restored his sword, healed his wounds with her tears, and helped him drive Grumish back, but not before blood was spilled. As Corellon's blood hit the earth, Sehainen's tears followed it. And from that mingling, life began. The elves were not carved, they were not forged, and they were not even planned. They were simply wept into being. A race born of love. And I say love because Sehainen is one part of Angarath, who is Corellon's current wife. But depending on the work you're reading, Corellon did marry Sehainen after his first wife's betrayal, but in only a few versions. In every version, though, she was always madly in love with him. And though Corellon hadn't meant to make them, the elves, he saw them and he claimed them. The elves became his children. He nurtured them, empowered them, even offered parts of his own divine essence to guide them. He was their father by choice, not design, which in a way makes him more of a parent than most gods who built their races on purpose. Now, there are other myths. Some say the elves were once formless echoes of Corellon's will, spirits that danced across the Feywild before choosing to enter the material world. Others place their birth inside of Arvandor itself, a living paradise that shaped them just as much as Corellon did. And yes, there is a version where Araushnee, Corellon's first wife, plays a major role in their shaping, but we're saving that mess for her chapter. What matters here is this. Elves were born not from dominance or conquest, but from sorrow, sacrifice, and beauty. They are, in every way, art given breath and life, and that truth will define everything else Corellon desires for them. One thing that makes elves unique is that they reincarnate. So let's discuss how that reincarnation happens and how it came to be. Unlike most mortals in Faerun, who pass into the fugue plane upon death to be judged and collected by their respective gods, elves follow a different path. Instead of awaiting judgment in the city of judgment or being cast into the wall of the faithless.
So, for context, The Wall of the Faithless is basically a wall that is made out of all of the bodies of people who didn't claim a deity or a deity didn't claim them. Picture, if you will, any of the walls that Leviathan has made in the Hellraiser movies or comics. I'll put some examples. I don't know if YouTube's gonna make me blur them. It's pretty graphic. It also was a piece of cut content from the first Baldur's Gate game. Fun fact. Elven souls bypass the fugue plane entirely. They go straight to Arvandor, Corellon's realm. And there, they don't ascend, they don't fade, they just wait. Which, as a non-religious girly, and yeah, I know, it's crazy considering the first of my 3 degrees is in cultural anthro, focused on mythology and religion, but I don't practice any. I really favored that the elves don't have to worship a god, because honestly, the Wall of the Faithless just screams banish to outer darkness, and I don't vibe with that. And as I was saying, when an elf dies, their soul drifts to Arvandor, which is a forest realm of Corellon. They wait for a new vessel, a new elven child to be born that can house their soul again. This is Elven Reincarnation, and it's a direct result of the moments elves choose to take on a fixed, physical, gendered form. When they made that decision, they severed the divine fluidity that once kept them eternal. They lost the ability to simply return to Corellon and become one with him forever. And so, Corellon gave them something else. A second chance. 1,000 second chances, really. Reincarnation isn't just a punishment, it's also a gift. A father giving his children the ability to change and find themselves, to define their own lives, and to choose, in time, whether they want to return to his embrace or remain out in the beautiful world becoming something new over and over again, one born not from spite, but from love. Corellon didn't want his children to fade or to die or to even be separated from him. So he made sure that they could live again and again and again, until one day they'd grown enough to return to him not as echoes, but as their fullest, truest selves. Would you, as a parent, gift your children everlasting life? Even if the way you had to do it was painful or complicated or misunderstood? Because that's what Corellon did. Because for all of his drama and defined theatrical flair, at his heart, he loved his children. But let's answer some of your questions from that short. Number 1, do elves automatically reincarnate? No. They go to Arvandor and they wait. If no vessel is available, they remain there until one is. 2. So, no new souls ever happen? Yes and no. There are no new fully elven souls. Corellon's original soul pool is finite. However, when a new half-elf is born, or a drow child is born to non-Celadrine worshipping parents, but then that drow later chooses to follow Corellon or another Celadrine god, those souls, when they reincarnate, join the collective cycle. So while a fully elven soul isn't going to be freshly created, the reincarnation population can still grow, just slowly and conditionally. Number 3, what about the drow? The drow who choose to turn back to worshipping Corellon are treated just like any other elf. They reincarnate. But the drow who don't, well, they're collected by their chosen god instead of doing the typical reincarnation. Number 4, do half-elves reincarnate? Yes, but only if they choose to worship the Celadrine Pantheon. Number 5, if an elf worships a non-Celadrine god, what happens to them? Elves who choose to follow other pantheons are collected by that god instead. For example, Shadowheart's father worships Selûne, since his Theremin, elven soulmate, wasn't an elf or a half-elf, and he wasn't part of the Celadrine. He would join his beloved in Selûne's embrace instead. And a side note on the drow, all drow were born from the betrayal of Araushnee, Corellon's first wife. She betrayed him, not just turned from him. She tried to off him. But Corellon, he didn't turn on the drow. He offered the drow a path home, a chance to reincarnate, to choose to return to him again and again. He loved them. And even after everything, he still does. When we talk about whether Corellon is a good god or not, remember this moment. Remember the god who, even when abandoned, still made sure his children could find their way back to him.
even if that takes them eternity. So, what is Arvandor? If you ask an elf where they go when they die, the answer isn't heaven, or the fugue plane, or even reincarnation, despite that being what they do. The answer is Arvandor. Arvandor is the plane of the elves, a magic realm of breathtaking beauty and natural splendor. Picture, if you will, lush forests, towering mountains, clear streams, and a vast sparkling sea. It holds both untamed wilds and serene patches of civilization, like the court of the Celadrine. Each of the elven deities on the Pantheon has their own domain, flowing seamlessly into one another. It's where Corellon resides, where the Celadrine rule, and where the spirits of the elves wait. To a mortal, it might just look like a paradise, but for an elf, it's simply home. And just like Corellon himself, Arvandor is ever shifting. It isn't locked into a static form. Forests shimmer with impossible colors, the sky dances with an aura that no spell can replicate. It's not a place of final rest. It's a place of re-becoming. This is where the elven souls go when their mortal body dies. They don't go to the City of Judgment, they don't face Kelemvor's scale, and they don't risk the Wall of the Faithless. They pass into Arvandor and they wait. Sometimes for years, sometimes for centuries, all the while needing a vessel to house them again. And when I say a vessel, they're not taking over a child's soul. Elves are born without a soul until a new one takes over that vessel. But not all parts of Arvandor are created equal. Like a celestial echo of Corellon's judgment, the elves who have given up their physical forms and embrace fluidity again dwell in the most radiant reaches of the realm, closer to Corellon's essence. Meanwhile, those who still desire a physical world wait further from his presence, still cherished, still protected, but not at their final home. It's also worth noting that elves don't have to be dead to walk Arvandor's moonlit paths. During their trance, living elves often find themselves treading those same ever-shifting forests, reliving memories, or as children visiting fragments of their past lives. Those souls don't just return to Arvandor after death, they belong to it, always connected. So, what is the elven trance? Known as a reverie, this state is a form of deep meditation.
Falling into your trance should have been as easy as breathing, yet peace eludes you. You recall a wild wood, touched only by the Telquasir.
To outsiders, it might look like restful silence or a prayer. But for an elf, it's something far more profound. While in trance, an elf remains aware of their surroundings, but inwardly they walk in memory. And not just the memory of their own life, especially not for the young elves. Elven children are known to see vivid moments from their past lives. They hear voices that once belonged to them. They feel battles they never fought. They recall lovers, friends, and family who haven't drawn a breath in centuries. And these aren't dreams, they're soul echoes. This experience is part of what makes elves so spiritually unique. Their childhood is shaped not only by their immediate surroundings, but by the ancient tapestry of reincarnation. They are shaped by themselves in every life. And through this, they might renew old bonds, speak with the spirits of the Feywild like Halsin did, or walk side by side with their soulmate long before meeting them again in flesh. When an elf reaches adulthood, around 100 to 110 years, the connection to their past lives starts to fade. The trance becomes focused only on their current life. They can relive any moment they've experienced with crystal clarity. But those past incarnations become distant, untangible, gone but not lost. And that's because the trance isn't just about memory, it's about communion. Through the trance, elves often walk in Arvandor itself, even while they're still alive. They feel the moonlight of the impossible forests, smell the sparkling sea, and even glimpse Corellon and feel his presence in the rhythm of the realm. According to the Complete Book of Elves, the trance also includes mental exercises that renew the body and spirit. It is a practical and spiritual, a ritual of rest and remembrance. Some sub-races, like the Drow, are more inclined to sleep, which in and of itself is fascinating considering how much danger they live in. However, it also makes sense given they want to divorce themselves from non-Drow elfhood. But most elves cling to trance, not just for efficiency, but because of what it gives them. It gives them back themselves. Unless, of course, something traumatic takes that away. As we explored in Astarion's lost elf self, years of pain and torture under Cazador stripped Astarion of his ability to remember who he was. His trance became a cage of nightmares. The thing that should have kept him whole was being used to hollow him out, because that's the dark side of the trance. If your life has been cruel and controlled and torturesome, that is the only thing you're capable of reliving, and that is what you will walk night after night after night. There's no escaping it, even in your sleep, only enduring it. And still, even in that, the reverie proves how powerful elven souls are. They can endure, walk, and remember everything. So let's talk about Araushnee, Corellon's first wife. Before the elves took physical form, before the betrayal that shattered the Celadrine, there was Araushnee, the weaver of destiny, goddess of artisans, and Corellon's wife. Together with Sehainen, Araushnee ruled as one of the three primary goddesses of the Elven Pantheon. She was not only Corellon's consort, she was his equal, a co-creator of laughter and life, despite the fact that he was a greater god and she was a lesser god. She bore him 3 divine children, Veyrune, Elistray, and Vandria, and once beloved by nearly all of elvenkind. But that love was never equal. Corellon saw her as his everything, but she didn't see him with the same level of dedication. But ambition soured any devotion she did hold. And over time, Araushnee grew resentful of her role. Despite the gifts Corellon offered her, she desired power. Not that was granted, but that was taken. She wanted to become him, to replace him, to rule in absolute power. She began to conspire in secret, not only to dethrone Corellon, but to ensure his demise. First side note, there are some people who think Corellon cheated with Sehainen, given that he remarries her later. This is because it's mentioned that Araushnee felt she was rivals with Sehainen for affection and time. However, firstly, there's no evidence of him having an affair, nor even of Corellon being poly, which most elves are. Secondly, Araushnee, however, was having an affair during this time with Mearls, which Sehainen discovered and then shared with Corellon. This brought him heartbreak, and although he stayed with Araushnee, Corellon's followers began picking sides in a separation that hadn't happened. And the second side note, there are many variations of her final actual betrayal. Some are more sympathetic to Corellon, and others are more sympathetic to her. A few even suggest her betrayal began during Corellon's battle with Grumish. But the version most widely accepted among canon sources is this. Araushnee enchanted a scarab, meant to hold Corellon's sword so that it would shatter during battle. She stirred the god Malar to strike Corellon while he was weak. And she manipulated her own children, particularly Elistray, into delivering cursed items into her father's hands. Her final plan involved poisoning Corellon under the guise of healing, and when that failed, she struck Sehainen Moonbow and imprisoned her with the help of their son Veyrune. Despite all of her planning, Sehainen escaped and warned the other goddesses. She and 2 of the top goddesses joined and became a new goddess named Angarard. Together, they saved Corellon's life. In some versions, the 3 goddesses split again for a time, and in others, they never separated again. Araushnee was put on trial. Veyrune and Elistray were cast into a temporary exile, and Araushnee was stripped of her divine status. She was transformed into a Tanari, a demon, and banished into the abyss. The council wanted to see her life felled, but Corellon would not hear of it. Even then, she tried one more time to off Corellon, and once again, he couldn't bring himself to destroy her. She fled, or in some versions was thrown into the demon web pits. And from there, she became Lolth, the Spider Queen. It's worth pausing here to say, this is not just a story of good versus evil. This is a story of heartbreak, manipulation, and tragedy. Araushnee wasn't corrupted by any outside forces. She simply chose power over love, and nearly unmade her whole family in the process. But Corellon, he didn't retaliate in kind. He didn't damn their children. He allowed Veyrune and Elistray to remain as gods, even if in exile. And he offered all of the Drow, who are the elves who chose to follow Araushnee and her children, a path back to his grace. Araushnee's betrayal was personal, violent, and calculated. And still, Corellon did not destroy her. He loved her, and in some ways, he always will. The elves who followed her became the Drow. They abandoned Corellon, or they simply felt abandoned by him. They built cities in the Underdark, and there, Lolth watched as they tore themselves apart. And she knows that by killing his creations, by stealing worship from his pantheon, that she can chip away at the power that she once stood beside, but never got to hold alone. And even now, centuries later, as her Drow raid surface elven cities, slaughter innocents and wage war they barely understand, Corellon doesn't lift his sword, not against her. Even now, married to another, a marriage that was from the purest and most selfless kind of love, he can't bring himself to strike down his first wife, because some part of him still believes that she might come back to the good side. He doesn't curse the Drow. He didn't destroy their gods. He let Veyrune and Elistray remain. And he made a promise. For any who wished to return, they could, and he wouldn't stop them. Because Corellon's love might not always be soft, but it's nothing if not relentless. So, is Corellon a good god? Well, that's the question, isn't it? Corellon, the first elf. Well, he's definitely not a perfect god, but he does do his best. Corellon treats his followers as children. He expects them to uphold the values he holds dear: beauty, creativity, protection, and community. And in return, he offers more than distant reverence. He offers divine blessings, protection, and loving guidance on their path towards self-improvement and the betterment of elvenkind. He doesn't command, he teaches. And when needed, he doesn't just watch from up on high. During great raids, he even steps down from Arvandor to fight beside his people. He doesn't ignore his clergy, he blesses them actively, through healing, through bountiful harvests, and through unity with other divine beings. He collaborates with other gods, not just dominates. And he listens. He's known for listening so deeply, in fact, that he reshaped his own divine gifts to reflect the diversity and fluidity that he himself embodies. One of his most recent blessings, canonically granted through his divine magic, allows some elves to change their physical, biological, assigned gender if they so choose. I want to say the S word, but YouTube will not let me. If they so choose, physically. It isn't just about identity. It's about being able to be yourself in an ever-changing and fluid world. And because of that, Corellon has become a deeply important god to trans players and characters within the Forgotten Realms. And it fits perfectly. Elven society, at its best, is built on inclusivity, identity, and freedom of expression. It's why Corellon is also so fiercely protective, not just of pure-blooded elves, but of any of those who carry elven blood. He is the father of a vast and radiant family, and he protects them with a quiet ferocity.
Do whatever you need to, but I shan't be paying my respects to any of the gods on show.
You never felt the call of the divine, Astarion?
Oh, I've tried them all. None of them answered.
That's why someone like Astarion not being heard by Corellon is incredibly unusual. The silence Astarion feels likely stems from a severing of his soul bond, from losing his trance, his ability to reincarnate, and his divine tether to Corellon. It wasn't that Corellon rejected him and that the gods simply didn't hear him. And that's the tragedy. And that was a whole other essay, but you can go watch that. And then there's his abundant love. His love for his second wife, Sehainen. His love still for Araushnee, the goddess he spared despite the fact that she tried to unalive him. He opened the door to the children who followed her. He let their gods remain. And he's offered everyone a way home. Corellon doesn't just love unconditionally. He loves unreasonably and unrelentingly. And then there's his most misunderstood act of all, reincarnation. When the elves choose to become physical, mortal, and mutable, they gave up their immortality, and Corellon couldn't bear the thought of truly losing them. So he gave them a gift that was masked as a punishment. A chance to live again and again and again, always with him. Corellon didn't demand that they stay perfect, and he made sure that they could always come home when they were ready, if that's what they really wanted. So yes, Corellon is a good god. In fact, he might be the best god in the Forgotten Realms. Not because he's flawless, because he very clearly isn't, but because he chooses love over wrath, compassion over control, grace over finality, and he listens to his followers. He's there for them. He supports them. He's genuinely a god. And if more gods loved and respected their creations the way that Corellon loves his, well, the Forgotten Realms would be a lot better place. And before you go, a girlie want to share a teaser from her next book, The Gemstone Souls Book 3, Infinity's Awakening, which is a spicy, poly-dark vampire romance. If you haven't read book 1 and 2 yet, possible spoilers, but that really just depends on what you consider to be a spoiler. I barely have time to spin before Mark snarls behind me. An angelwood stake glints in his hand. He drives it forward. Troy moves on instinct, placing himself between us. The stake plunges into his side with a sickening crunch. "Troy!" I scream, my voice cracking wide open. Something inside me erupts. Power detonates in my chest. Golden, blinding, holy, divine. My hair lifts in a halo of radiant fire, growing longer with each breath. My skin glows with ethereal light. My eyes go golden, not just the pupils, all of them. My fangs descend. I have fangs? I'm not human. I'm not a vampire. I'm not even a wolf like my mother. I'm something older, something deeper. I'm a goddess, the consort to the god of all vampires. Mark stumbles back, awe dawning across his face. There she is. Ashti, the master of the knowing, sister of Lilith. I lunge, but my body doesn't follow. It hesitates, traps me. I feel like I'm blinking, but I'm not in control. I see myself from inside myself. My soul, my mind locked behind a veil of divine power that I no longer command. I can't move, can't scream. I watch as she moves my arm, as she lifts my hand and drives it forward, thrusting her fingers onto Mark's chest. I'm fucking back, love, my voice says. But it's not me. It's her. Moira. And I'm buried again, trapped in the void within the knowing, helpless, watching, as my goddess body becomes a weapon that I no longer wield. And I'm sure that you heard me mention Lilith back there. This series involves a lot of the gods across multiple mythologies. It's a love letter to my first degree, and the majority of them being from Mesopotamia. Well, that's a love letter to half of my heritage. If you want some insight on these gods before diving into the books, you should check out my Who Was the First Vampire video, as I took a bit of a deep dive into the gods related to Kelly and Troy in this series. And with that, thank you for being here today. Writing and gaming are my passions, and with subscribers like you, I get to express those passions. So I hope to see you in the next one. And good night, darling.